Good day and welcome to another Monday Momentum. Today I'm going to talk about neuroscience. Really, it's about rewiring your brain for success. So your brain can learn and change in an instant. Most people, I mean, the old saying was, I should say this, uh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, we know that not to be true anymore because neuroscience has proven that at any age you can continue to grow and learn. This is an important lesson because too many of us get stuck in our sort of this is the way I've always done it type attitude. And as I believe it was Einstein said, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Now, I'm assuming that some of us, we want something different. And so if we want something different, then we've got to change the way we do things. So I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about the brain so we can all sort of understand this because I find this so incredibly fascinating. Your brain weighs about 3.5 pounds and it is made up of 75% water. And inside that tissue is something in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 billion neurons or nerve connections. And this is places where your brain can connect things to create language, to create movement, to create memories, all of those things. So um, when a baby is born, it has no neural connections. And for those of you who have children, and I have some recently, when I say recently, within the last year and a half, some grandbabies come our way. And it's just so amazing to watch with a different set of eyes that this little baby, I remember when she was born, the last one, when she was born, she was a little bit premature and undersized, less than 5 pounds. But you just look at this thing and it just came out of her mother's womb and into this world, and it's like, I don't know, I can't even imagine what could possibly be going on. But anyways, so now over the last year and a half of her mom and dad interacting with her, and of course us and other people interacting with her, she's started to make all these neural connections and she's starting to get language and she's, getting the movement thing figured out and she's really smart. Um, so what's happening is she is making neural connections. Now, neurons that fire together wire together. So that movement becomes not something you need to think about, it's just something that happens. Um, and, the words eventually, and she's getting quite a few words already, which is pretty amazing to watch or hear, I guess. Um, but again, as she says these words and she gets reinforcement from her parents or us or whoever happens to be around, she's making more solid neural connections. So again, those neurons that fire together wire together. And so now she's getting language. And it's just so incredibly interesting to watch. Now, from the age of 0 to 7 is apparently when a vast majority of the connections are going to be made. So by the time this little gal is going to be 7 years old, she's going to have a whole language. She's going to have, her movement all figured out, all of this stuff. She's going to start having memories, or not start having, she's going to have memories. And she's creating this little personality. Now, over the next 7 to 10 years, somewhere in there, is still going to be a lot of connections being made. She learns how to play ball or play basketball or play volleyball or swim, although she's already learning how to swim. What am I saying? But anyways, again, she's making all these neural connections. Now, if you have if you were lucky enough to be born into a very supportive environment, she's getting like this little gal's getting all kinds of messages about how cute she is, how smart she is, all that kind of stuff. And so she's making these connections saying, I'm smart, versus unfortunately for some people, some of us, we weren't born into as nurturing as a family unit. And so we were getting maybe not as strong, or probably the not good messaging. Um, so this person great or starts to grow up and formulate a personality around that. And so eventually, you get into you start creating a personality. Like she's already got a little bit of a personality. Um, but, by the time 10, 15, 20, she's going to have a fully developed personality. Now, your personality creates your personal reality. Now, just think about that for a second, because we all know people that have these magnetic personalities, and people just, you know, come around them. They've drawn to them. And then we also know people that have repellent, I'm going to use that word, personalities, and nobody really wants to be around them. And so you can see now how they're starting to attract and create their world around them based on their personality. What I love about this lesson, and I'm not sure, like they say, when's the best time to plant a tree? 10 years ago, 15, whatever. When's the second best time? Now. So me learning about this neuroscience in the past 5, 6 years, because I've spent a lot of time uh, really fascinated by this, um, is the desire to teach this to younger people, sort of probably the junior high, high school age, grade 9, grade 10, somewhere in there. Because I think people are still, well, I don't think this is when they're still formulating things. And for them to go, okay, so the way I feel right now isn't the way I have to feel for the rest of my life. If I work at rewiring my brain, I can really open up my horizons for just about anything. So, um, and the interesting thing is that your consciousness, who you are as a person, is in that 3.5 pounds of gray matter, which is, like I said, 75% water. So do that with what you make. That's just an interesting factoid, if I could call it that. I'm just looking at my notes here. See, I don't think I need to cover any more on here. Um, I guess maybe just to cover on this idea, like we have different parts of our brain. I'm not going to get into them because I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a neuroscientist. So this is a you know, dumbed down version, if I could call it that. We have our solid brain, then we have a limbic brain, which makes up of all the parts of the brain that control our memories and our emotions and our past and all that kind of stuff. And then we have the prefrontal cortex up here, which is where we do our thinking and stuff like that. And we have a little thing in our limbic brain called your amygdala, and that's the thing that uh, fires your fight, flight, or freeze survival mechanism. So there's understanding those three different components to the brain. There's more than that. You got a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere and all that kind of stuff. But the point of this is to make is that here's what happens to some people. They have a anxiety attack or a panic attack, and it comes from some part of the memory part of the brain, because it's not typically like if you're walking down a street and you've never experienced a car and it drives by you, you're going to go, "What was that?" Uh, but you're not going to like freak out and panic or have anxiety about it. Well, you might, but the point of it is that, so let's just say you have a panic attack, you're about to get on an airplane. And so somewhere in your limbic brain, there's a memory of something that caused you to feel unsafe. This isn't a thinking thing. It's really just an emotional thought, or pardon me, emotional automatic response. And so you go into anxiety and maybe into a panic attack, and you're just about to get on a plane. So you connect the dots, says, I must be afraid of flying. When in fact, this could have been triggered by a memory that happened to you when you were 10 years old or 7 or 5 years old. So it's important to understand that, because you can rewire and change your brain at any given time in your lifetime. So I'm going to move on. Let's get into the meat of this presentation. So here it says repetition is the mother of skill. That's because neurons, as I said earlier, neurons that fire together wire together, and they create like language, memories, how to, skills, talent, all that kind of stuff. And so, and over your lifetime, that's accumulated. And now, again, vast majority between 0 and 7, big chunk between 7 and 20. Then it starts to slow down. And I think, and again, I'm not a scientist, but I think part of the reason for that slowdown period after that is that, and I've read this before, where the vast majority of people, once they finish high school, never read another book again. And what I mean by reading another book is not fiction, unless it's got some story to it that's woven into, humanity. But I mean, books that you learn where you learn something about, space and time and science and uh, agriculture, travel, all this stuff stimulates your brain and starts to make new connections. So if you have a fixed mindset, you really believe your intelligence is fixed. You were born with a certain amount of intelligence, certain amount of ability, certain amount of talent, and then it's really pretty well unchangeable at that point. And you're limited by your capacity because the desire to change. Your brain just assumes that you really can't do that, and it leads to some level of I just give up. You know what? This is just who I am. When in fact, it's not who you are. You can change who you are at any given point in your life. So if you look at from the dynamic brain side, this is that's your growth mindset, and that's a belief through learning and effort and persistence. You can develop new skills, new thoughts, new ideas about stuff. Your brain is really plastic in that it can be changed and altered at any given time. And you do that by learning. You do that by doing something. You learn a new skill, a new language, whatever the case may be. And that creates another level of connections, neural connections inside your brain. And you have all these neural connections inside your brain that for just about everything that you do, these group of neurons that fire together to get in the shower, a group of neurons that fire together to cook dinner, a group of neurons that fire together to interact with your friends, a group of neurons that fire together when you go to work, all of that kind of stuff. So, you got to from my perspective, and I've been a lifelong learner since I was in my late 20s or just after 25, 26, somewhere in that. And in part because I, like a lot of people, lived a very sort of reckless life, youth. And I think in part because, I don't know, I wasn't really afraid of dying. I didn't really have any sort of idea about how long I was going to live until I got to, like I said, 26, somewhere in there. And I thought, you know what, there's a good possibility I might live a little longer than I thought. So I better, apply myself to something. And that's when I started reading personal development books and doing some, sort of professional training stuff and learning that I could learn new things. So I've become a lifelong learner. I'm committed to learning all the time. So, um, so again, the fixed mindset, I don't like to be challenged. My potential is predetermined, and I'll just pretty well stick to what I know. And I don't like feedback because it makes me feel bad. It's personal, and I either can or I can't. I think it was Henry Ford that said, you either can or you can't. No, pardon me. You think you can or you think you can't. You're right in both instances. And sort of the fixed mindset is that I'm just going to give up because it's too frustrating. Now, a growth mindset is like, I don't fail, I grow. And this is a really huge lesson for anybody. I can't tell you how many times I've been to conferences and the speakers, highly successful people, um, saying, I've succeeded because I've been open to failing. Because I know that every time I fail, I'm just learning something new, a new way of doing things. Tony Robbins, he talked about a time when he was talking to somebody and they typical what you hear from people. I tried that. I tried that. Well, tell me, how many things have you tried? I've tried 50 things. Okay, tell me 3 or 4. They can think of one. People give up way too easy. They give up way too easy. So remember, the challenges help you grow. And you can really learn to do anything that you want at any age in your life, whatever you want, whatever you desire. And my efforts and attitude determine my ability, not who I am, not on the fixed side of things. This is just who I am. And feedback helps me grow. Okay, so this is from Judith Glazer's book, Conversational Intelligence. For any of you who are, wanting to get ahead, I would read this book. It's hugely eye-opening for understanding what goes on when we're communicating with people. So a quote from the book is, conversations are not just words, they are neurochemical exchanges that trigger trust, fear, connection, or disconnection. And you can see on the light side here, I got dopamine, adrenaline, cortisol, serotonin, and oxytocin. These are chemical messengers or neurochemicals that when you are experiencing something, they go off. So just to give you an example, let's say you're walking across a park and out from the woods comes a dog just snarling and running towards you. You're going to get a huge hit of dopamine. Pardon me, you're going to get a huge hit of adrenaline. You're going to get a huge hit of cortisol. These are our stress hormones, our survival hormones, designed to get you to either fight or run, or in this case of rabbits, oftentimes it's just to freeze because if you don't move, maybe they won't see you type thing. Dopamine is something you get when you do something good. So let's say you go to work and you do a good job and your boss says, "Hey, that was awesome, man. I'm so happy that you were able to do it." You get a dopamine hit. Somebody says, "Hey, that was smart." You get a dopamine hit. Somebody says, "You're right about that." You get a dopamine hit. And dopamine is part of the motivating neurochemicals that happen. So dopamine is a healthy thing to have because it motivates you to do things. When you go, when I do something good, I feel good. So dopamine is an important thing. Serotonin, this is a comfortable kind of neurotransmitter, makes you feel good about life in general. And oxytocin is that they call it the bonding neurotransmitter, and that's you get when you hold a baby or you hold a loved one or you pet your dog. Um, it's really this connection that you make with people or with anything. And again, it's that I feel good about life. And so, as the little graphic here says, when you're going to build, and part of what I'm sharing with you is for personal reasons, but part of it's because if you're a business owner, you need to learn how to connect with people and communicate with people that doesn't fire up the wrong neurotransmitters. If you don't want adrenaline and cortisol uh, hitting people up all day long because uh, first of all, it's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for you. If you've ever felt a high level of stress bordering on anxiety or anxiety and panic, that you can't live in that state for very long periods of time. And in fact, I would venture to say that people that typically take their lives do this because they're in anxiety or panic for such a long period of time that their body just completely breaks down and their mind just can't take it anymore. That's just something I think about because I've had people in my life who have taken their own lives. So anyway, uh, engage with the prefrontal cortex versus the amygdala. That's our thinking part of our brain. And so problem is when we are hit up with our survival um, neurotransmitters, cortisol and adrenaline, thinking about things isn't important. And so really your front part of your brain where you do your thinking shuts down. Your focus goes like this to, I got to listen because where's this danger coming from? Or where's this, or you're looking around, where's this danger coming from? You don't want that in your employees and team. First of all, you might think, having people a little worried, scared, or whatever at work makes them work harder. It doesn't. It might in the short term, but it does never in the long term. Never in the long term. Okay, let's keep moving along here. Um, so neuroscience, thinking about things that stick. So if there's an emotional component going on, this is part of what makes memories stick. And this is why people have PTSD, for instance, because they experience something in a high emotional state. And so now not only do they have the memory, of that event, but they have the feeling in their body of that event. And the feeling in the body in that event is way stronger and way more powerful than the thinking about it. Um, so this is why, like, if you ever go to a Tony Robbins event, you'll see there's a lot of activity, a lot of action, a lot of, you know, jumping up and down, cheering. Because Tony's thing is, I want to keep you in a high emotional state. I want to make sure you're having a lot of fun. Because if you're in a high emotional state and you're having a lot of fun, you're going to learn more and it's going to stick. So important thing to think. So teach to learn. Part of the reason why I decided to do this Monday Momentum is because I want to dive deeper into the lessons that I've learned over my life, and I want to share them with other people because it allows me to learn even more about them. So, you know, I prepare for these presentations and put the time and effort into these presentations because um, in part because a big part of it is because of the people that I serve. I want to be able to serve them at their best, but I also want to be able to be the best version of who I am. So when I teach this stuff, I learn way more. Space repetition versus cramming. If you think about this, you know, I've never been a crammer in my entire life. I mean, there's been periods of time where I've spent a lot of time focused on learning something, but there's always spaces in between there. So this is what it's spaced repetition. It's better for me to plow into something for an hour and then take a 15-minute break or a half hour break and then plow back into it for an hour versus putting 2 hours in there because you start to get mentally exhausted and your thinking isn't as clear. So, you know, taking a little time off and then coming back to it. One of the things when I was at a conference, the facilitator, presenter, I guess, said, you know, you got your notes, you're writing your notes. As soon as we're done today, go back to your room and review your notes before you go do anything else. The reason is because if you don't review your notes, let's just say you took all these great notes and then you didn't review them, period. It would all be gone within a week. You barely have any memory of it. You might be able to, you know, flip yourself back into it, but it would never be part of how you function and how you do life. Um, so you read your notes. She said, read your notes as soon as you day is done before you go out for dinner or go for drinks with your friends or whatever it is. And then the next day, review them again before you start your day. It's all about retention. It's all about retention. And the other thing is to give something meaning. Give it meaning. You know, think about your business. Think about what you're creating and why is it important, not just for yourself, but start with why it's important to you, and then why it's important to your family, and then why is it important to your team, and why is it important to the customers that you serve, and why is it important to the community as a whole. When you give meaning to something like that, it attaches way more solid. You're firing more neurons, creating neural pathways, and groups of neurons that create um, take these lessons and make them into something that you're living. So yeah, so discuss things. Audio visual is always good with stuff. Lecturing and trading. What I mean by that is like, don't just lecture somebody and then, oh, I'm done. Get something from them, trade with them, learn from them. Okay. So why adults struggle to learn? It's all about habit loops and sort of fixed identities. I'm going to use an example that I heard a long time ago. So this guy lives on a little farm. He's got a little creek. It's about a half mile away from where he lives, and there's really great fishing there. And he goes fishing there at least every week, maybe more often. And he takes the same path every single day to get to this same fishing hole and catches some fish and goes home on exactly the same path. So think about this. That path is like a neural pathway in your brain. The more you think and do something the same way, the stronger that neuron or neural connection becomes. As I said, neurons that wire together, fire together. Now you've got a habit or a habitual way of doing things. That's just the way we do it. That's just the way I've always done it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way, it's the more productive way, it's the more efficient way. It just means that's the way I've always done it. And so to break, and so going back to the fisherman guy, so one day he thinks, I got a little extra time today. I'm going to try going a different way just to have a look, see what's different. And so he goes, sees different vistas, different scenery, different animals, different birds, different uh, foliage, plants, flowers, all that kind of stuff. And he's going, wow, this is so pretty, and this is so also cool, so new, and all of this stuff. And he gets to his fishing hole, and it took him an extra half hour to get there. But he goes, wow, that was cool. I really like that. And he finishes fishing, he goes back. Maybe he goes a different way back, or maybe he just decides to go back the way he's always gone back. Then the next time he goes fishing, he goes, oh, I don't have as much time, back on exactly the same neural pathway that he was on before. And that's how our brains work. You create these neural pathways. And generally speaking, to get outside of that neural pathway requires some effort. It requires some energy. It requires a different focus. And so it's taxes other parts of who we are. And so people just fall back into, I'm just going to do it the way I've always done it. It's just easier for me. It might not be the most efficient. It might not be the most productive. It might not be the best for your company, but I'm just going to do it that way because it's just easier for me to do it that way. You gotta smack yourself on the side of the head and get out of that, because you could, if you found a better way of doing things within a short period of time of doing it that way, that would become the neural pathway. That would become your habit. And in business, efficiency and productivity equals profit. So, the solution to this is to be curious. Just go, hey, what if I was to do it differently? How would I do that? What are the three or four ways that I could do it differently? Let me just jot down the steps that needs to take place in order for me to get there. Get curious about that, and be open to being vulnerable. Vulnerability is a superpower. You know, Oftentimes our egos, they get in our way of our success by saying that I just need to be right. And I don't want anybody to know that I'm not actually right, or that I don't always feel right. In fact, sometimes I feel like I'm an imposter. Sometimes I have a feeling I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I say to my clients, I go, you're with your leadership team, say, listen, hey, guys and gals, I'm a human being just like you. I'm learning just like you. I always say when I start workshops with clients and their teams, I say, listen, if I have to be the smartest person in the room here, then we're in trouble. And I don't mean that because I don't think I'm smart, because I do think I'm smart. But what I do know is that if there's five people in the room, I want to tap into the collective intelligence. I don't want to just, this is the way it's done. This is the way I do it. This is the way you'll do it, because it might be stupid, just to be, frank. And then, so be open to be vulnerable. Be open to say, you know what? I'm just trying to figure this out too. Why don't we try to figure it out together? Remember, team together, everybody achieves more. Okay, and the last one is create a safe environment for people. You don't want people going into fight flight at work all the time. In fact, you probably don't want them going into fight flight. Well, let's say if there's an emergency, you want people to be able to go, right? First of all, they can go because they know what to do. I give you a personal example. Some people over for dinner one night, and my wife, my cousin, who's a funny guy, is always telling jokes. He tells a joke, and she inhales a piece of food, and it goes into her windpipe. And so I look at her, and I can see she's got a funny look on her face. And she gets up out of her chair, and I just looked and I said, "Are you choking?" And she said, "Yes." I just jumped up, grabbed her around the abdomen, gave it a quick, like, poof, out came the food just like that. That was not me sitting there. How do you do the Heimlich maneuver? It's because I heard it so many times. It was just a response. And so that's sort of an example of, getting into, I need to be activated here. But in the most cases, especially in team meetings and stuff like that, And if you're dealing with a, a problem employee, if I could call it that, a challenge with an employee, if I could call it that, is you want to make that environment as safe as possible because you want to come to a solution that'll help them become successful. Because when they're successful, you're successful. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Let's keep moving on. So some tactics you can use to rewire your brain. One is to shift your questions from to possibility versus problems. Some people, they have a problem for every solution, and other people are going, if there's a problem, there's a solution. Let's find it. So what could we do? What are the things we've tried that haven't worked? Well, how could we tweak that? Because sometimes it's just like step 3 or step 4 was the incorrect step. And so you might have to just alter that a bit. There is a solution for every problem. And if there is no solution, then there is no problem. And what that means is like you're focusing in on the wrong things. Don't focus in on that. Prime for trust. You know, if you're having a challenge with one of your employees, you say, hey, listen, I need to have a conversation with you. There's a few things I feel we need to work on to help you succeed. And I want you to know that this is what I want you to do. I want you to succeed here. There's nothing more that I want you to succeed. So here's some things that I see you're doing really well, but here's one thing that we need to nip at the bud, whatever that might be. So prime for trust, because if you make that connection with people and you have their trust, they'll open up, and you just open up a whole other part of who they are. So repetition and reflection, journal, talk, practice. First of all, uh, too many employers tell an employee how to do something once, and then they think they should know how to do it for the rest of eternity. I think you might be picking up on this idea. Like if you haven't created a neural pathway for them to easily understand to how to do it that way, you're going to be disappointed. So repetition, do some videos, have some documentation on how things are done, do training on a regular basis. People go, I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to. You will get time if you do it. But if you don't do it, you will never have time. And that you can take that to the bank. I'm one of these guys who journals. I like to journal because it helps me think things through. Sometimes when you're putting the pen to paper, it makes you think a little bit differently. And then talk to people. One of the reasons why myself as a business coach has been so successful is because business owners often want somebody who they can talk to figure out their way through challenges that they're experiencing and having. So talk to people. Don't be afraid to talk to people. It is a superpower to ask for help, by the way. Okay. So I shared this. This is from Byron Katie's work. It's 4 questions you can ask yourself. I highly recommend this. I do this with business owners, with my clients from time to time, depending on the challenge that they're experiencing, but they might be saying something. I say, so is it true? And oftentimes, because they're in a loop, right? Neural connections, they go, yeah, it's true. And I said, okay, can you absolutely know it's true? And then when they stop and think about it and they go, I don't know, maybe not. I don't know. So how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? So typically is I get mad, I get frustrated, I get angry, whatever the case may be, and I become whatever that might be. Ineffective communication. So who would you be? The 4th question is, who would you be without that thought? I remember working through that with a client of mine that was struggling with one of his leaders on one of his teams. And we worked this out because he was part of the reason why this person was struggling, because of the way that he was communicating with him. So start by asking yourself better questions. What if? What if we change this? What would be possible? What becomes possible? How could I? Who would I need to get me to help with this? What could I do differently instead of, why did you do that? Why am I so whatever? Right? So, just take a minute now here and just write down one belief or behavior or thought pattern that you're willing to rewire this week. Uh, I'm just going to give you just a couple of seconds because you can do this after the video's over. But just think about this. What is one belief, behavior, or thought pattern I'm willing to rewire this week because it's good for you, it's good for your family, it's good for your team, it's good for your customers, and it's good for the community that you live in. All right. So, here are 5 practical and scientifically backed strategies to help rewire your brain for success using the power of neuroplasticity. So, visualization. So I've done this. When I was in Toastmasters 25, 30 years ago, I can't remember exactly when, but I'm aging myself. When I had to do a presentation, I would visualize myself giving the presentation, and then I'd visualize everybody giving me a standing ovation at the end of the presentation. So now that put me in the right mindset for creating something that was special. So that your brain cannot tell the difference between something that actually happened and something you visually, or pardon me, uh, vividly imagined. And I learned that back in, I think I was 26, 27, 26 years old. I read a book by Maxwell Maltz called Psycho-Cybernetics. And basically that's what he said is he was a plastic surgeon, and people coming back from the war, he'd fix them all up. And, some people, they go, wow, this is so great. And other people, even though they looked fantastic, still saw, um, the faults that they had. And he said, people, what you vividly imagine is just as real as something that actually happened. So spend 2 to 3 minutes every day doing some visualization of success. So just see that success happening, whatever that might be. A great team of people working for you, happy customers, good profits, great family, all that kind of stuff. Those things will strengthen those neural pathways and connect you to better outcomes. So feed your mind with empowering inputs. What you consume shapes how you think. I had a friend of mine one day, this is a couple decades ago, and he was telling me that he's reading his book and he's so depressed. And I said, well, first of all, I asked him a little bit about the book, and then I said, well, why don't you stop reading it? And he did. And those sort of depressive thoughts went away. So, um, remember that what you put into Tony Robbins, I remember at one of his events, he said, stand guard at the entrance to your mind, because what you let in there is going to affect you dramatically. So read, listen to, surround yourself with people who have empowering ideas and content. And again, repetition forms those mental grooves, or that neural pathway. So replace those disempowering narratives with positive narratives. Challenge your self-talk. The brain listens to everything you say about yourself, especially inside your head, because I don't know if many of you might have heard of affirmations. I think if you're not doing affirmations, you should do them, but you need to look at them or make them feel a little bit different. Something I learned from Tony Robbins. He calls them incantations. I don't know that it really matters, but the point is that you say them with emotion. So, stand up, put your chest out, shoulders back, and say, I am a highly focused, energetic, powerful leader, changer of people's lives. And I get things done. I am not stopped. I don't get stopped by anything small. I take on the biggest challenges and I tackle them. So you got to stand up and you got to say it with passion, because as I said earlier in the slide, when you connect that emotion to it, then you're starting to make the grooves in the neural pathways. So every day, take 30 seconds, a minute. Doesn't take long. If you do that on a repetitive basis, you're going to have dramatic changes in your life. So, as it says here, replace I can't with I'm learning. I'm learning how. It's this is hard with it's helping me to grow. And I always say this, if you say it's hard, guess what? Look, it can't be anything else, can it? It's going to be hard. So replace it with it's fun and it's easy and I'm growing. And I'm in the process of changing. I'm in the process of creating this. I'm in the process. So use language that rewrites your identity. Okay, let's keep moving along. Reflect and reinforce with journaling. I already talked a little bit about that. I think I don't know if I mentioned, but I started journaling in the early 90s. So I can look back in, say, 1993 and see how crazy I was back then. My point being is that uh, when you journal, you learn things that you don't learn when you're not. Let me just put it that way. So capture insights, reinforce positive patterns. So, when you see something or write something that's positive, sit down and contemplate it for a while. And do this for 5 to 10 minutes every day. It will strengthen those learning loops. Practice mindfulness and state shifting. So for those of you people who don't or haven't really heard of mindfulness, I just want to sort of put it this way, like if I, for instance, take a look at these little sticker things that I put in the notebooks when I used to read mostly, oh, you can't even see that, but I mostly read books, like literal books, like these ones back here. Well, you can't see them. Anyways, it doesn't matter. You get it. Like real books. When I say real books, most of the books that I read now are on my phone. But anyways, when I'm focused in on that, that becomes the only thing. So if let's say you've got an unhappy customer or unhappy employee or a delinquent employee, whatever that is, and you focus in on that, that's not being mindful. Being mindful is to open up your view of things. So for instance, when I sit here, as I said, I'm looking at this, but then I just open up my view and now I can see all these pictures that I have up on the shelf up here. I can see my hand sanitizer. I can see my lights. I can see all my family members. I can see all these pictures. So now I'm opening myself up. And I do this when I'm out walking. It's a great time to do it because too many people, they're looking at the ground and they're watching where they're stepping. What I do is I just go, I want to just see what I can see when I'm opening up my vision. And so I'll see, if we're out into the park, I'll see trees and flowers and, all this kind of stuff that's over here, as well as all the stuff that's out in front of me and to the side of me. And when you do that, when you open up your a vision like that, your brain goes into that looking and seeing those things. So now it's not thinking about tomorrow or that person you got to go see, those emails you got to send, that unhappy customer or whatever. That goes away when you're focusing in on being mindful. The past goes because you're not thinking about the mistakes you made in the past. You're not thinking about, how you did something back when you were 15 years old that was stupid. So being mindful. Now, the other part of that that's not in here is meditation. Again, for meditation is simply being mindful about the present moment. So closing your eyes and sort of disconnecting from the outer world. You don't see, you don't hear, because I wear headphones with some music playing in the background, music without words, just some nice, easy flowing music that creates a level of focus. So, and then I just focus in on the present moment. And for those of you people who say, I can't meditate because of my brain's always going 90 miles an hour, that don't argue for your limitation. That would have the first thing I would say. And the second thing is just make it a goal to have 1 second, 2 seconds where you're not thinking about something. And those 1 second, 2 seconds will turn into 3 and 4 and 5. Now, I got to say, from my own personal experience, I'll sit down for like sometimes I'll meditate as much as an hour. And I would venture to say that 50 minutes of maybe not that much. It's hard to say because it's sort of in this meditative state, but I want to say a large portion of that I'm still thinking about, a client I'm working with tomorrow or the client in the afternoon, or I'm thinking about going on my vacation, taking a cruise, or I'm thinking about an interaction with a person driving down the road that the other day who cut me off, that kind of thing. But there's that time where my brain is just focusing on the present moment, and it's a gift. It is a reward when you get to that place. And I've had this lots of times where I was in a very unresourceful state of mind, and I took the time to get into a meditative state. And let's just say, for argument's sake, my stress level or anxiety level, whatever you want to call it. I want to differentiate this because I think it's important because stress is good for you because it makes you stretch. It's when it goes into that anxiety stage that it becomes unhealthy. So at the top of the stress level, you're flirting with anxiety and then you get into anxiety. But I've been full on anxious about I made a huge mistake and I lost a ton of money. Uh, and I was just like in a very unresourceful state. And I'd get up and I'd be like just anxious to like crazy. And I'd sit down for 15, 20 minutes and take that from a level 10 down to sometimes zero, oftentimes zero. And then I'd focus in on what do I need to do to, replace all that money that I lost. Anyway. So mindfulness meditations will shift your state. Another thing is just using Tony Robbins lessons is, walk around the room with your chest out and, use those powerful declarations or incantations or affirmations, however you want to describe that. Just use those but do it standing up, walking around, being very powerful. Okay, so let's move along here. So here's some things that you can ask yourself. What I'm thinking about right now, is it actually true? And this goes back to Byron Katie's questions. Is this thought helping me or is it hurting me? So, how do you know for sure? If you're feeling bad, if you're feeling anxious, then it's hurting you. I think I said this earlier, but just if I didn't, if you have cortisol and adrenaline that's flooding through your brain, through your body, because it's not just in your brain, it's in your body. And if it's going on like that 24/7 for lengthy periods of time, it's breaking you down mentally, but it's also breaking you down physically. I believe, and there's lots of people that believe this, you can do a lot of reading around it, the placebo effect, all that kind of stuff. Um, so, pardon me, if you're in that sort of survival state of mind for long periods of time, it's breaking down your immunity. And you've heard of people who say, I have an autoimmune disease. And I read this someplace, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm not claiming anything, but from what I understand, autoimmune disease is like, we really don't know why you're experiencing this. So we're going to just mark it down as an autoimmune disease. So, but here's the thing, I do believe this to be true is that if you're in a survival state of mind for long periods of time, it does break down your immune system and opens you up to all kinds of different ailments. So the next question is, what else could be true here? So open up that door to curiosity and perspective, because when you do that, you're just creating a different space. Remember when I talked about personality becomes your personal reality? You're using your personality to open up different personal realities. And so what would be best, what would my best self choose, sorry, to think about or do next? And then just write that down and then just do it. When you're in that active mode, like one of the things that I found in my own life is that if I do feel depressed or anxious, it's because I'm not doing. When I do, I feel great. So just a side note to think about. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. I hope you got value out of this. If you did, please like it, subscribe to the channel, watch my other videos. I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to help you because I know if I'm helping you, guess who else I'm helping? Me. Because the best state to be in is the state of service. And when you help other people, you will be rewarded tenfold. You've heard this before. What you put out there comes back to you tenfold. Nothing could be truer than that. So I challenge you to work on your mindset, use this idea of neuroplasticity to change your brain. If you want to, there's a really good book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza, which is a great read on understanding more about how your brain works and immensely helpful for me. And it's a best-selling, and he's a best-selling author. I think he's got 5 or 6 books and lectures. So you can follow him on YouTube as well. So feed your brain with good stuff. So just before I end, if you're interested in finding out more about working with me as your business coach, and when I say business coach, because I'm going to help you set up systems and processes that make your business run more efficiently, more productively, and therefore more profitably. I'm going to work with you to build an exceptional team of people who take your business and just make it thrive, even while you're on vacation. And I'm going to make sure that you'll have a lot more fun and you make a lot more money. And of course, if you're going to keep the best employees, you got to help them make more money too. So don't get caught up in this, because I've seen that happen with clients in the past. Money that they should have maybe paid out in bonuses. They went out and bought themselves a fancy car, and then some key people quit, and then there you are, starting all over again. So the point is like, yes, be happy about making profits. Be happy about making good money. But don't forget about the people who helped you get there. So with that, if you want to know more about what working with, go to my website, laurymcnaughton.com or scaleupbizcoach.com. Go down a little bit. You can click on a link. It's a discovery meeting. It's literally 15 minutes long. I just want to know a little bit about you. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I want to know what the specific challenges that you're experiencing, what roadblock might be holding you back. And if I believe that I can help you break through that and get through it, then we'll book a longer complimentary coaching session where we'll dive in and I'll just ask you a whole heap of questions so I can really, really understand what the cause of the problem is. I'll talk about what some of the solutions are. And if you think there's value in us working together, we can talk about a program that works for you. Take care. Have yourself a spectacular day. And thanks for joining me today.